Welcome to section 1.1 of gastrointestinal anatomy. In this section, we will be memorizing the retroperitoneal structures. Let's get started. Our retroperitoneal structure story takes place in the backyard of an old man who doesn't take kindly to young whippersnappers eating apples from his apple tree. So let's bring in our first youngster. See that sweet bandana on his head? It's pretty retro. Bandanas were cool at one point. Anyways, this retro-dressed kid will help you remember that this image is all about retroperitoneal structures. The rest of the kids we bring in will also be dressed in a retro way. So I will do another slide toward the end to reiterate this idea. Now let's focus on what this kid has done. As you can see, the kids don't show much respect for his property, eating apples without regard for who they belong to. This kid ate a whole bunch of apples. Ate kind of sounds like aorta. So the fact that this kid already ate the apples will help you remember that the aorta is a retroperitoneal structure. A logical counterpart to the aorta is the IVC. So it too is a retroperitoneal structure. If the aorta is retroperitoneal, then so is the IVC. With that in mind, all of the branches extending from the aorta and the IVC would also be retroperitoneal. The point is that if you can remember that the aorta is retroperitoneal with this kid who ate all of these apples, then you will remember that the IVC and all the branches of the aorta and the IVC are also retroperitoneal. Now look at this patch of kidney beans. These beans are also owned by the old man. If the kids don't care about the apples, then they certainly won't have guilty consciences for stomping all over these kidney beans. Anyways, these kidney beans represent the kidneys, which are also retroperitoneal structures. It also represents the adrenal glands, which sit on top of each kidney. And this makes sense. If the kidneys are retroperitoneal, then the adrenal glands, which are right next to them, must also be retroperitoneal. So when you think of this defenseless patch of kidney beans, just remember the kidneys are retroperitoneal. And if the kidneys are, then so are the adrenal glands. Now what is this kid doing by the tree? He's urinating on it. As if carelessly eating the old man's apple wasn't frustrating enough, these kids urinate on his tree when they are done. Do they have malicious intent? I don't know, but the actions are irritating regardless. In any case, urinating on the tree refers to the ureters, which are also retroperitoneal. This makes sense. The kidneys are retroperitoneal, so it stands to reason that the ureters, which extend immediately from the kidneys, would also be retroperitoneal. So again, urinating on the tree stands for ureters. Now let's bring on the old man himself. Look at him standing there with his old man grimace, holding his double-barreled shotgun. Now the double in double-barreled shotgun kind of sounds like duodenum. So the fact that this gun is clearly double-barreled will help you remember that the duodenum is also a retroperitoneal structure, all except the first part of the duodenum. So we see written here, the duodenum is retroperitoneal, including the second through fourth parts of the duodenum, not the first part. Let me explain this logically. If you've ever handled a cadaver, recall that you can grab the stomach with your hand. That is because the stomach is intraperitoneal and it's not shielded in the retroperitoneum. And extending directly from that stomach, which you can grab, is the duodenum. The duodenum doesn't immediately dive deep into the retroperitoneum. It actually needs a chance to first make this deep retro dive. So with this in mind, the first part of the duodenum should be considered a part of the stomach with reference to the retroperitoneal structures. And the remainder of the duodenum, the second through fourth parts, is actually retroperitoneal. So when we refer to the duodenum, we are not referring to the first part of the duodenum. But again, double-barreled shotgun for duodenum. Now the old man is joined by his awesome wife, who comes out with her trusty pan. For clarity, this woman or her armed husband have any intention of hurting these kids. These are actually really nice old people. This is just a front to scare the kids off. Anyways, this pan she's holding stands for pancreas. We like to use pans to represent pancreas because it sounds similar. They both start with pan. So this pan will help you remember that the pancreas is a retroperitoneal organ. Pan, pancreas. Now this bluff on the part of the old couple is working. As you can see with this hooligan ascending this hill in the yard, he is tearing off to get away. The fact that he is ascending the hill represents the ascending colon. And the ascending part of the colon is retroperitoneal. Ascending the hill, ascending colon. Startled by the blustering old people, this poor kid lost control of his bike, which threw him to the ground. The boy can now be seen descending down the hill. The kid's descent represents the descending colon. Descending down the hill for descending colon. Implicit in his downhill descent is the fact that he wrecked on his bike. Wrecked sounds like rectum. This represents the fact that the rectum is also retroperitoneal. So again, wrecked on his bike for rectum. In our bodies, between the descending colon and the rectum is the sigmoid colon. Notice how there is nothing here to represent the sigmoid colon. This is appropriate since the sigmoid colon is not retroperitoneal. The parts of the colon that are retroperitoneal are the ascending colon, the descending colon, and the rectum. I promised I'd bring this idea back up at the beginning of the lecture, so let me remind you of the retro garb seen on these kids. You may have noticed that the ascending kid has this nice retro mullet, and the kid descending the hill has a vibrant pink shirt with a stellar black stripe. And again, the kid who ate all the apples has a radical retro headband. And with that, You've learned all of the retroperitoneal structures. Now let's do a question to apply what you've learned. A 26-year-old amateur boxer presents to the emergency department following a high-impact punch to the lower back. He describes excruciating pain near the costovertebral angle. His blood pressure is 80/50. Emergency laparotomy is performed. Is the injured structure retroperitoneal or intraperitoneal? Hopefully you noticed that this patient's kidney was injured because there is significant pain at the costovertebral angle, which is the location of the kidney. And further, this pain came as a result of a high impact punch there. So we're thinking kidney. And now that we've identified that the kidney is injured, hopefully you also notice that the patient is hemodynamically unstable. His blood pressure is 80/50. That's way unstable. And the question asks, is the injured structure retroperitoneal or intraperitoneal? The kidney is retroperitoneal. Recall our memory hook. We have the kidneys right here. So this patient's kidneys are injured, which are retroperitoneal. Now let's do one last question. A 17-year-old woman is injured in a motor vehicle accident. When she presents to the emergency department, there's diffuse ecchymosis across her abdomen from where the seatbelt restrained her during the impact. She is hemodynamically stable. An abdominal CT scan is obtained and shows a retroperitoneal hematoma. Which of the following structures may be the source of the blood found on the CT? So we know that we're looking for a retroperitoneal structure because there was retroperitoneal damage, which led to this hematoma. So which of these structures is retroperitoneal? Well, based on the image we reviewed, we know that the entire stomach is not retroperitoneal. So A is wrong. The ileum is part of the small intestine, also not retroperitoneal. So that's wrong. And the same goes for the sigmoid colon, which we discussed before. We know that the ascending colon and the descending colon and the rectum are retroperitoneal, but the sigmoid colon is not. And choice D says first part of the duodenum. We know that that's wrong, because the duodenum is included in the retroperitoneal structures, but not the first part. Recall the double-barreled shotgun stands for duodenum, just not the first part. Now, this leaves us with choice E, which is the correct answer, but why is it the right answer? Well, we know that the internal iliac veins must be retroperitoneal, because the aorta is retroperitoneal. Therefore, the IVC must be retroperitoneal, and if the aorta and the IVC are retroperitoneal, then the branches from these must also be retroperitoneal. And the internal iliac veins are a branch of the IVC. Remember this kid who ate too much? 8 stands for aorta. So again, when you think of aorta, deduce the IVC as well, which is a natural counterpart to the aorta, and think of their branches. Which of the following structures may be the source of the blood found on the CT scan? The internal iliac veins, choice E. And that concludes this section.